Hi, you're very welcome to the podcast. My name is Anita Bourne and I'm the founder of the Femcast, a podcast and website driven by a passion for empowering women and promoting gender equality. Through the Femcast, we are making it our mission to educate, empower and encourage women to harness the power of their voices, share their stories and raise awareness of the crucial issues affecting women today. By amplifying women's voices, the Femcast aims to strengthen women's rights and celebrate the achievements of women everywhere. We are passionate about making a positive impact through storytelling, advocacy, and creating a supportive community to act as an inspiration to others who aspire to effect change. Come visit our website, www.thefemcast.com, for more information on what we do and resources to help you. In this episode of The Bullied Brain, we talk about narcissists, psychopaths, and Machiavellians, collectively referred to as the dark triad. Jen explains how narcissists have a destructive impact on the lives of those around them, how they are fixated on themselves and constantly seek validation and admiration from others. Jen talks about the harmful effects of being in a relationship with a narcissist, how they engage in gaslighting, manipulating their partner's perception of reality, and causing confusion and self-doubt. Jen advises how to protect oneself from narcissists, paying attention to red flags such as pathological lying and excessive flattery, trusting your instincts and not dismissing feelings of unease or discrepancies in the narcissist's behaviour. We discussed the importance of maintaining a support network and not letting the narcissist isolate the victim from friends and family. Jen also talked about psychopaths and their similarity to narcissists in lacking empathy. They are described as empty individuals who seek to exploit the talents, resources, and relationships of those around them. We talk about the effects of being in a relationship with people with these mental disorders, rebuilding trust, feeling safe, and regaining one's sense of self may require time and support from others. So Jen, you're very welcome back to this episode. And today myself and Jennifer are going to be talking about narcissists, psychopaths, and Machiavellians. And Jen, would you like to start off? This is a subject to you because obviously you're very keen to get the education out there on the brain and how these personality disorders affect other people in their circle. So if you'd like to just talk about, I suppose we'll start with the narcissist and their personality and people that are around them and what happens to their brain.
Yeah, it's a fascinating condition. It wreaks havoc with so many people in their lives because if you have a parent who's a narcissist or a romantic partner or a boss who's a narcissist, it can just absolutely ruin your life. And so, I just recently, as you probably know, Anita, I wrote an article for Psychology Today, and I called it the idea of it, or the gist of it was, how do you protect yourself against people like that? And they're referred to in the literature and the research as the dark triad. So narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, these are the dark triad. And they call them that. Researchers are pretty dry people. They're pretty measured and they really look at facts and figures. And so when they start to use language like the dark triad, you know that they're kind of emotionally engaged in the really negative impacts of these people. So a narcissist, you can see it in bullying behaviors, basically, because one of the key components of the narcissist is they are, it's almost like, I don't know how to describe it exactly, but in my mind, this is how I think of it. They're like a half person. So the narcissist needs a mirror, and they're like, it's almost like an anxiety for them, or an obsessive compulsive thing they have to do. It's very similar to that, where, if you imagine a child who probably comes from a lot of trauma and abuse in the home, and that can be in the form of emotional abuse, like constant put downs, constant criticism. It can be emotional neglect, where the parent is not affectionate, they're not loving, they're not connected. They're so busy looking at their phone, they never look at their kid. It doesn't have to be. People tend to think of abuse needing to be incredibly violating and harmful to the body for it to do serious harm. But that's not true. Emotional neglect, criticism, berating, put downs, all of these things do damage to the brain, and they can lead to the conditions of personality disorders like narcissism. So if you see a kid on the playground, they can't just go and play. They're not looking for other kids to hang out with. They're not looking to learn new things or play on the swing set, or they're looking for a target. They're looking for someone that they can start to put down and make feel horrible and humiliate and laugh at and create an audience or a community around this ceremony of degradation, it's called sometimes in workplace research, or public shame. They want to create community around harming somebody. So, I mean, this is a kid. This is a really early sign of mental illness.
Wow. And do you think they've inherited that behavior from the parents? Is it something like the parent has passed down?
Well, in the research, I mean, it is quite possible, I think. And, I leave this to the scientists, but it is, and the psychiatrist, but it's possible that a person could be born perhaps with a very, very weak empathy circuits in their brain. The people are born on a bit of a spectrum when it comes to empathy. So some people are what we call them empaths, and they have a very high level of empathy. Like they feel everyone else's feelings. They are so attuned to other people's intentions and thoughts. They can just read it. It's like being a mind reader. And that's a fabulous gift to be given. Well, on the other end of the spectrum, surely it's possible that someone gets born without really strong empathy networks. If they're lucky, they grow up in a family where the parents are empathic and can teach them and they can practice and it can get stronger and stronger. But imagine a kid in a house where maybe both parents are having to work. Maybe they have to work a third job to make ends meet. Maybe they're incredibly stressed out. They don't have time for their child. Canada, we call it a latchkey kid. So that means a kid that comes home after school and lets himself in because their mom and dad are working. So, I really you hate to criticize other parents. We all make mistakes, but, as psychologist Joseph Burgo puts it, a narcissist doesn't come from a happy home.
Right. And can you teach children empathy?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the most exciting thing about the brain. The brain has neuroplasticity. It has the ability to grow and change and get stronger. And it also is vulnerable. It can get weaker. You can erode neural networks for empathy, but you absolutely can strengthen them. And one of the techniques that I love that Dr. Helen Reese talks about, she's at Harvard. She's a doctor and a psychiatrist, and she works with patients and other doctors. And she specifically works on training medical people, how to increase their empathy and put it into practice. And just to give you an example of one of her techniques, she really encourages doctors to look into their patient's eyes and make a mental note of what is the color of the person's eyes. Because when you look deeply into someone else's eyes, you're really, the old fashioned saying is it's a window to the soul. But really, from a brain point of view, you're taking the time to truly see that person, to pause all your own thoughts and feelings and stressors maybe, and you're really looking at them and you're kind of soaking them in. And when you do that, it's going to change, for most of us anyways, how we interact with that person.
Really? Is that not like a bit uncomfortable if you're a narcissist and somebody's looking into your soul?
Well, if you're a narcissist, or a highly abusive person, sometimes it's really hard for you to meet people's eyes.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought.
Yeah. One of the ways in which you can identify sometimes something's off with someone is if they can't hold your gaze or they can't look in your eyes. Now, the caveat to that is lots of people can't meet your eyes for all kinds of reasons. They might come from a culture where it's considered rude to hold your gaze. Like in the indigenous culture, for example, here in Canada, you meet the person's gaze and then you look down as a sign of respect. So, you have to be, every single thing you say in these types of regards, there's so many layers and complexities and nuances to it. So, yeah, but gaze is a very interesting thing.
So, after the school grounds and you've identified it, or sometimes you don't, and if we move on to intimate relationships, how do you identify a narcissist?
Well, it sounds awful because we've all been raised to believe in these big romance mythologies, right? Everybody, but people read romance stories and they love rom-coms on TV and movies and so on. But the truth of it is, if this is your intimate relationship, and I don't want to sound really cold and sort of non-romantic. But you got to be careful. In the 21st century, the last thing you want to do is connect yourself with a narcissist. I mean, it's going to be a terrible experience for you. So here are the key traits that should give you a bit of an indication. And you don't want to be nutty about it. Like, you don't want to be sort of stalking them and figuring out, really what they do and who they're connected to and what they say and so on. But a narcissist is a pathological liar. So it's not a bad idea to keep an eye on what they tell you and how it matches up. And, people whose lives depend on really knowing other people and understanding what their intentions are, they would tell you to trust your instincts. So if you are dating somebody and they're giving you this big, long story about something and it just doesn't quite seem right, doesn't quite ring true, or there's something that's affecting you on a physical, unconscious level, that is worth paying attention to. And don't disregard it and don't just dismiss it and get caught up in the romance, because that can sometimes be an indicator to you that you need to do a bit of homework. One of the things that a narcissist will do, I don't know, Anita, if you've heard the expression love bombing.
Yeah.
Okay, so the love, I mean, it can happen at work too, right? You go into the interview at work or you go out on a date with this person and they're just madly in love with you. They think you're the greatest thing in the world. And in fact, every single thing you say, they're like, oh, me too. But really what they're doing is they're showing you a mirror. You're looking into not someone's face who's holistic and healthy and an integrated person. You are looking into the mirror. They are putting a mirror forward to you of flattery and adoration, and you're the most talented so-and-so we've ever had at work, or you're the most gorgeous woman, or the funniest woman, or smartest woman I've ever met. Like, that should be ringing alarm bells for you. Like, unless you are the funniest, smartest, most beautiful woman on the planet. And, even then you should still be a little bit cautious, because that's just too much. Love is something, you can fall in love with someone, but true love, as we all know, it takes a lot of time. It takes effort. It takes good days and bad days. It's a complex emotion that's multi-layered and influenced by a million factors. So if someone's madly in love with you, you kind of want to take a step back and really look at that. You want to look at the stories they tell you about where they work, about their family. I mean, I worked with a guy who was a narcissist when I was teaching at Humber College in Toronto. And it was fascinating. He was this young guy, really hip and happening, sort of graduate student, blah, blah. I drove him once to an event and he told me all about how his parents were both professors at Stanford and they had died in a car accident. Well, it never occurred to me that he would be lying. I just, you assume people are telling you the truth. Well, anyways, he gets to about 3/4 of the way through the year and they find out that he hasn't marked a single exam or a single essay. They're sitting on his desk untouched. And he's been issuing grades to all these hundreds of students that he's never looked at their work. And this is part of this sort of narcissistic, it's so shocking when you encounter it, because they just create a completely false persona. It's amazing.
Wow. That's mad. I thought I just called them chaos. It was bad. Yeah. Can we talk about intimate partner? Because it's a psychological violence with the narcissist, and how women can recognize it and, I suppose, plunder. I won't say leaving, escaping is a better word, maybe. But because of the language they use and the manipulation and the damage they do to the brain, how while the women are in it, they can protect themselves, and I won't say reverse the abuse because that's going to take a lot of time, but how they can help themselves until they can get out.
One of the best things I think you can do, if you get into a relationship, the person creates the whole honeymoon phase where they're just adoring you and loving you and everything's so romantic, and you come to believe that they're a certain type of person, and you've fallen for it because it's really, you're looking into a mirror. It's everything that you want in a man, and you've been really open-hearted. You've worn your heart on your sleeve. You've intimately connected, and you're just sure that this mirror you're looking into, that's everything you want, is a stable sort of a thing. But once the narcissist has lured you in, has trapped you, has brought you in under all these false pretenses, that's when the gaslighting really starts to become apparent. The gaslighting began at the very beginning. They were making you believe something that wasn't true from the very beginning. And for them, it's a game. They really enjoy the game of trapping and conquering people. That's where they get power from. So just like a kid who's very unsophisticated on the playground will get power from putting down another child, that's conquering another child, making another child look small and helpless and weak. That for the narcissist is a real rush of power. They love it. Well, imagine in an intimate relationship, you're now an adult. You are so sophisticated in how you conquer these people and make them fall for you. And you try and take, you want everything from them. You want their faith and their hope and their dreams and their money and their relationships. You just want everything. So how do you protect yourself? First of all, you have to be really skeptical during the dating process. Don't fall for anybody. You got to make positive sure this person's telling the truth every step of the way. And if they aren't telling the truth, that is a red flag. You're not in a healthy relationship. Any even small lies should worry you a lot. So one of the best ways to keep track of truths and protect yourself from gaslighting is to write a diary. And that diary or that journal has to be completely private. You never want the narcissist or the person you're starting to have doubts about know that you write things down, because it's a way for your brain to keep track of what's real and what's a manipulation, right? And the brain suffers so much in a narcissist relationship because it can't figure out what's true and what's false. And that's really incredibly unhealthy for the brain. The brain is an organ designed to make meaning out of reality. It's perpetually bombarded from outside. The sense data that's rolling into your head and my head right now is enormous. And our brain, lightning speed, is sorting out and deciding what to pay attention to and what not to. So, for example, my brain has decided to pay laser attention to you. It is honed right in on you, your facial expression, what you're saying, your gestures. It's anticipating what you're going to say or a question or a comment. And I'm ignoring massive amounts of data coming at me from outside the window to my right, to the window to my left, to the feeling of air, etc. Right? On the inside, interoceptive, it's called, I'm getting tons of information, and so are you, from our bodies. I've got a bit of lower back pain. My brain's not paying attention to that because it's laser focused on you. I'm really hungry and I'm looking forward to eating in an hour. So maybe it's making me feel a little bit edgy. That's information. My brain's not really that, concerned with it. It's focused on you. So imagine the brain faced with a narcissist. You can't tell what's real and what's false, and your brain stops being able to make sense of reality. And that means the brain really, it degrades its various systems. And this is why people get someone will say something like, I became a shell of myself. When you're being bullied and abused and this person is manipulating you and you can't tell anymore whether you can trust them or not, or whether they care about you or not, or if they're even healthy or not, or if they're going to hurt you, you can't tell, your brain can't figure it out. So yeah, you feel like a shell of yourself because all the systems in your brain, your balance, your health, your ability to concentrate and focus, your ability to be productive, all the things that problem solve, creative, all the things the brain does, the brain's like, put it offline. It says, can't worry about that right now. We have to figure out reality, and we can't figure reality out. There's something really, really wrong. This is dangerous. And so it starts to pump you full of cortisol and adrenaline, and it starts to be really panicked. And this is why people stumble away from these abusive relationships, not knowing what's up, not knowing what's down. They've got vertigo. They can't balance things. They're just a shell of themselves.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, isn't it? And when the trust goes and you don't feel safe because stuff you thought was true or happening and you believed to be true was not true. There was no safety, there was no trust, and now you're doubting everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's the gaslighting is, I think it's just violent, the gaslighting. And yeah, it's really, really bad. So the gaslighting narcissistics, the role is to confuse, and people think they're losing their mind. So how do we reprogram or relearn to trust, to feel safe, to get back to the way we were?
So one of the key things dealing with anybody in an intimate relationship, and especially dealing with someone who's a narcissist, is to maintain your community. And you have to be wise about it. The narcissist will try to control your relationships. And they're also extremely adept at putting on the fake persona in front of your community. So what they end up doing is turning your community against you, because the narcissist will start to cast doubt about you. They might go behind your back. They might tell falsehoods about you, create a bit of a smear campaign. They might play one friend off another. I mean, it's all about games for them. It's all about competition. It's about winning games. It's about lying. They don't care. They'll lie to anybody about anything. So if I was going in, I mean, I'm old now, but let's pretend I was dating and going into a new relationship, I wouldn't hand over all my family and friends until I was 100% sure that this was the most trustworthy, healthiest, most holistically integrated person on the planet. So keep your own people separate until you're sure. I mean, you don't want the narcissist or the new man in your life or new woman in your life to have access to everybody. Because if they're not trustworthy, then they can start to manipulate all those other people too, and they'll want to. And they're adept at acting like they're the greatest person, the pillar of society, greatest person on the planet. It's just that behind closed doors in the household, another persona appears. So you've got to be really protective. Don't let anyone gaslight you. Write down exactly what you said, what the other person said, date, time, place. And then when the person tries to the narcissist tries to say, you never said that, or I never said that. In the moment, just play dumb. Just be like, oh, really? Oh, gosh, I remember it differently. And then when you have privacy and you're safe and your door is locked, you look at your journal and then write down beneath that entry and say, on November the 8th, she tried to tell me that never happened. You've got to keep track of it. And this is how you keep a track record of what's happening. On this day, she tried to tell me that I spend too much time with my family. On this day, cut to a week later, he really doesn't think my girlfriends are a good influence on me, and I'm spending too much time with them. And he loves me so much, and he's so jealous that he wants more time with me because he's madly in love. So I really don't have time for my family anymore, and I don't have time for those girlfriends. And maybe they are a bad influence on me. All that stuff should be in the journal, because cut to 2 months later, when your family has sort of drifted away and your girlfriends have been hurt because you don't connect with them anymore, that's when you all of a sudden are in the person's clutches and you don't have a community.
And entitlement is a big thing with them. It's this entitlement that they take control, and the language they use to manipulate and confuse the victims.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, Anita, to interrupt. I was going to say that one of the things I found most fascinating, I don't remember if you and I talked about this before, but I was reading research about psychopaths. And psychopaths they're really quite comparable. They can manifest as narcissists, they can manifest as Machiavellians. And first of all, they lack empathy. So, it can be really shocking to find out that the person you're in a relationship with actually has no sense of your pain. And they don't care because they don't actually feel it. They can't feel what it would be like to be betrayed in the way that you do. They just are thrilled that they won. That they won. You're a wreck. They took everything from you. They won the competition. They're the winner. Like, that's really kind of foremost in their mind. And they'll do anything to get to that place where it's really important to them that they make you into a loser, because that's the only way they can feel like a winner. So this is where you can see that the person comes from abuse, right? They've had any sense of selfhood hammered out of them. They've had their empathy neural networks removed by a lot of trauma, probably in the home or at school or in sports or church. However they got abused, they are riddled with kind of self-loathing, lack of self-knowledge. They're hurting kinds of people. I'm not trying to say that or that they don't have to be held accountable, but they're empty people.
Totally. And then they play the victim when you call it out and how hard they've had it.
I mean, the sad thing is, it's usually true. It's just that they're so damaged now that they never grow up. They never become whole. They always are in this state of lack and kind of, I mean, irony is they're dependent on their victims. They're not whole people. They have to have a victim mirroring their power because they feel no power. So they're not even really playing the victim in that sense. They're not rationally, consciously going, I'm going to destroy this person. When this person turns around and says to the world, I'm just launched a huge lawsuit against, this employer, let's say, or I'm launching a lawsuit against my husband because he's trying to take my children from me, or whatever it is. When they start to say, oh, how could you do that? This is a witch hunt. They're looking for other victims to bolster up their case. Oh, they're ruining my life. This is destroying my reputation. They really believe it. And that's the sad thing. These people are damaged people.
Do narcissists actually go out with narcissists? Or do the narcissists look for a weak character? Not a weak character, because I know they absolutely beat them down and their self-esteem verbally and controlling them. But so narcissists would never end up with another narcissist.
It'd be pretty unlikely because what a narcissist looks for is happiness. They look for people that are happy, connected, have a community, are loved, are talented, are empathic, all the things that they lack. They want to absorb from someone else. They want your talent. They want your goodness. They want your friends. They want your family. They want you to make them look better, bigger, and stronger and more powerful because they don't have that inside. They are lacking. Just again, get that image of kid on the playground, can't go to school and have fun, can't go to school and learn things, is looking for someone to hurt. That's the only way they can feel good about themselves. Same thing with the adult narcissist. The adult narcissist, it's a broken record. They just look for victim after victim after victim.
It's a source. It's called the source, isn't it? They're looking for a new source. And as an adult narcissist, can you teach them empathy, or are they too far gone?
Wow,
or they don't want it?
That's such I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I have never read in research that the narcissist personality has been repaired. I've not found anyone who's actually been able to show that they can be recovered. But there's work that is done on lots of people so for example, somebody who responds with violence. So if you have somebody who has been caught up in domestic violence, that person can absolutely recover. They can return to feeling safe themselves, untraumatize themselves, no longer activated by various things in their lives that set off this type of fight behavior, this sympathetic nervous system. They can absolutely be brought back to their true essential selves who are healthy and caring and loving. Now, I read that research. I have not ever found anybody that is able to say, I can take, a group of narcissists and turn them around. And you know what it goes back to, Anita, is exactly what you said. They don't have a sense that they're unwell. This is all they know. All they know is how to go out there and find a source.
Narcissists and children, how are they with their children? Like, I beggars belief that they have children. I suppose they don't see themselves as damaged. And I suppose the partners that are having children with them don't see them as damaged yet, or they're hiding it for the moment. But how are they then with their children? If they're like this with intimate partners, people they work with, if they're coaching children, with their own children, how are they with them?
Well, I mean, you can go and find all kinds of support groups out there for children of narcissists, because having a narcissistic parent is a pretty terrible experience. And, with all of these brain issues where the brain gets hurt, the brain gets harmed, it's a cycle. We just pass it on to one another like a virus. It's really tragic. And so, you know, in Canada, for example, research came out this week or last week, and the research showed that teacher sexual exploitation of children in our Canadian schools is increasing. And I mean, you look at that and I mean, it boggles my mind. We really are at a tipping point in society where we've got to make a decision. We've got to start understanding that brain health is critical. And if we just allow people to damage other people's brain health all the time, society is going to get worse and worse. Mental illness is going to keep going up and up. Abuse is going to be even more rampant. I mean, I sound so doom and gloom, but the bottom line is we have a ton of research. We've got a ton of brain science. We should get so knowledgeable and so empowered, just like you and I are talking about narcissists. What are the red flags? How come we don't teach kids? Why do we fill them with all this romantic garbage when we could actually be teaching them, here's the psychology, here's the psychiatry, here's the brain science. This stuff will save you. And I mean, yeah, kids growing up in a narcissistic household, I mean, the parent doesn't have the natural, you know, innately it wired into the brain empathy. The child is objectified for the narcissist. The child must reflect the narcissist. So how does the narcissist want the child to reflect? Maybe they want them to dress in perfect clothing and appear like a perfect student at school. Maybe they want them to be the best athlete. Maybe they want them to be seen and not heard. They're disinterested in the child's independent life and hopes and dreams and all those things. They don't care. The child is constantly forced into the position of mirroring this person who has got so much lack, this narcissist.
Yeah. So does that mean then that the child would have emotional and ethical behaviors and attitudes just like the narcissist? It's mirroring one.
No, it's a great question. The thing is, the brain is unique. Every single one of us has a unique brain. So right there, you could never answer that question. And then on top of all that, there's going to be kids in situations where the one parent will protect them from the narcissist. And maybe the narcissist remains, in the marriage, or they need to stay together for livelihood or to balance the childcare. All these tough situations all of us get thrown into, but they will protect their child. And maybe after the narcissistic parent goes to work, they'll tell the child it wasn't your fault. You be who you want to be. You wear what you want to wear. If you don't want to do that sport, you don't have to. Like they run interference, so that kid's a lot more lucky. That kid's getting two versions of what the situation is. If it's a kid in a house with two narcissists, I can't even imagine, that you're going to have struggles, right?
Yeah. So we'll go on now and we'll talk about the psychopaths. So what is the difference then, Jen, between psychopaths and narcissists?
I don't know if it's so much that there's difference. I think it's actually almost more, in my understanding, to be similarities. So let's talk about a Machiavellian for 1 second. Narcissism and Machiavellianism. I mean, both of those you could put under the umbrella of psychopathy. Psychopathy is like this term that leading researchers in this is two gentlemen called Babiak and Hare, and they've written a book called Snakes in Suits. And they talk about the psychopath at work and how to try and navigate this person and protect yourself. And it's not easy. It's the same thing we've been talking about with a narcissist in an intimate relationship. Let's imagine now the psychopath at work, the snake in a suit. And it's the same kinds of things. You can't trust anything they say. They will lie. Pathological liars. They are really good at grooming the higher ups. So they will skip all the middlemen and they will ingratiate themselves and form relationships with and go out for dinner with your boss or the head of the company or the manager. They're not interested in their colleagues except to use them as sources. They are the kind of person who, the competition for the intimate partner is to get you to fall in love with them, and then they destroy you. The competition for the psychopath at work, comparably, is to take your position at work, to ruin your reputation, to slowly but surely take your work and pass it off as their own. They do all kinds of things like they will bully you in front of other people, like humiliate you. They will talk behind your back. They will do anything they can to win the competition, because if they make you into a loser, then they feel like a winner, and they can't feel like that by themselves. They have a terrible lack. And so I didn't finish talking about the research, and it's a really important point if we want to look at this from a brain point of view. One of the things I found most fascinating is that you and me, let's say, when and we did talk about this before, I think, and it's worth repeating, it's incredibly important. If we were presented pictures of things that are emotionally intense, let's say we saw a picture of a man sitting on the stairs of an office building and crying, we would automatically, if you were watching our brains in an MRI or fMRI, the neural networks for emotion and for empathy and for connection, they would light up. Our brains would be like, oh, so we would feel that man's pain. We'd walk in his shoes. We'd go, maybe he just got fired. Maybe somebody humiliated him at work and he can't take it anymore. Who knows what could have happened to him? But if we walked past that guy down the street, chances are good we might go over there. Are you okay? Maybe the man needs an ambulance. We don't know, but this is all natural, human, innately wired. Humans can't survive without each other. We're absolutely wired for social connection. We are wired to live in communities. We're wired to be tight and close and caring with our families. Our brains are built that way. So you've got to imagine again, think about the psychopath, the narcissist, the Machiavellian. Those natural brain structures are eroded. They are missing. So if you watch the brain of a psychopath in an fMRI machine, and they were shown the man on the stoop crying, you wouldn't see the empathy and the emotional neural networks light up on their brain. Instead, you would see the neural networks for cognition and language light up. So how does cognition and language help the narcissist? You've said it a number of times, Anita. You've talked about the words they use. They're absolute masters of using language, using knowledge, using manipulation, cognition to make people do their bidding, make people believe in them, make people think that they're the pillar of the community when actually their goal is to hurt people. They're master manipulators. They wear a mask. And when the mask comes off, it's pretty terrifying. But they are so adept at showing this persona to the world that everyone thinks that you're the problem. It's incredible.
Yeah, I've seen it, and I've sat where they have no self-awareness when they talk. That sometimes the mask falls, and they wouldn't have self-awareness that other people would be making eyes at each other and going, did he just actually say that?
That's a really good observation.
Yeah.
I think that's another, let's talk again about what are the tools that we can use to keep ourselves safe from people like this. And as you put it very powerfully, whether it's the workplace or whether it's an intimate relationship, you need to start working on your escape plan right away, because you can't change them. You're never going to change them.
No.
And they're going to do everything in their power to dismantle your brain. So let's put in that tool right there. Watch for when the mask slips. You will they can't hold it all the time. So you need to pay attention to the moment when it's slipping. And in intimate relationships, you want to watch for the pattern. And this is where your private journal that you never let the person know you have. In your private journal, you record the days that the person lashes out at you and puts you down and screams and yells and says that you're the worst thing and that you're breaking their heart and they're going to commit suicide and whatever they say to you. And then the next day when they apologize, you want to watch for patterns.
And in the workplace as well, let's talk about that. Record.
Yes, absolutely. And on top of the recording or ensuring that everything's on email, when someone like a narcissist always wants to talk to you in person or on the phone.
Yes.
And you just keep saying you're too busy. Just say, you know what, put that in an email. Or after you've had the phone call, you write to them and you say, just want to keep track of our conversation. This is what we talked about. This is the action plan going forward. These are the outcomes we're expecting. Can you please send me a note confirming that this is the direction we're pursuing? Because the more you have a paper trail with these people, when your boss comes to you and says, oh, so-and-so just did this brilliant report, I wish you could do, work like this. And you take a look at it and you're like, this is mine. I did this report. I wrote this. And they say, no, you couldn't possibly have. so-and-so told me that they did it. I don't like to see you, not telling the truth here. Are you jealous? Is there something wrong with you? And then you've got the paper trail. Because if you
Yeah.
don't have that paper trail, the psychopath, the narcissist, Machiavellian, they love you to have like he said, she said, or she said, she said. And then you get caught up in this hall of mirrors is what I call it. You never know what's real, what's true, what's false, who believes what. It just becomes a mess.
Well, in some cases, they don't like you sending emails or having anything in writing, but I'd always keep it a note. I had a notebook everywhere with me. On psychopaths, what else are you looking out for? What do you do? Protect yourself there. Is it much the same? All three personalities the same?
Well, okay, so let's talk about Machiavellians because this is really interesting. And it also helps us understand how people become this way, how their brains get wired this way in adulthood. So a Machiavellian is a person who they have grandiose dreams and plans for themselves. And they usually have these grandiose or very entitled dreams and hopes for themselves because it was really impressed upon them in childhood that whoever they were really didn't matter, but they needed to fulfill parental expectations. So let's imagine you've got a narcissist parent. The parent doesn't care about you. They're not interested in who you are or how you grow or your friendships. They just need you to make them look good. Well, let's pretend you're just a pretty average kid. You're just a fun-loving, average, happy-go-lucky, everyone adores you kid. But you're not going to be a superstar in the workplace necessarily. You're not going to run the company or be the doctor that invents a new patent or something. You're just not that person. That's not even what you want. The narcissist makes you pursue that anyway because you need to make the narcissist parent look good. So what happens to the Machiavellian is they get into this situation where they have these grandiose expectations. They have to fulfill the parents' requirements for them to impress the whole world, but they don't have the skills. They don't have the knowledge. Well, that's when they start to plot how they're going to do it. And they become con men. They become people who put out into the world this really incredible image of who they are, but it's all fake. It's a house of cards. I don't know if you guys use that expression in Canada. When we talk about something, that you could just blow and it's going to fall over, but it looks like this beautiful house of cards. I mean, it's pretty interesting right now. We are watching on an international public arena, one of the greatest, and I mean, you shouldn't diagnose people. I'm not a doctor and I have no right to diagnose anybody, but I do find it fascinating that Donald Trump is manifesting narcissistic behaviors, psychopathic behaviors. He's a pathological liar. He's caught in lies 24/7. He's created this massive image of being a billionaire and having a real estate empire, but the whole thing is starting to crumble and shake as it's revealed that the way he's built this empire is on financial impropriety. I mean, it's only alleged right now. It hasn't been proven in court, but I mean, it's moving forward in through the justice system because there's so much data that they have. He's been a pathological liar about his finances as well, and like trying to pay the smallest amount of taxes at the same time as get the greatest amount of investment. So he just changes the value of his real estate empire to suit his grandiose notion of what he must be. And, he's a really good example as well of this condition because look at how persuasive he is. He has made millions of Americans believe that because he lost the election, and the one thing he cannot be is a loser. He can't lose because he's a narcissist. It's an agony for him, absolute agony to lose. So he's got to convince people that the election was false because it couldn't possibly be true that he lost. I mean, we are watching one of the greatest, most horrifying and dangerous case studies of this type of behavior unfolding on the internet, on TV, before our very eyes. It's amazing.
It's incredible, isn't it? And how he got people to believe that it was fraud and the elections were rigged.
They believe his lies. It's incredible. And the truth, I mean, going back to your question, Anita, I failed to answer it and I can't answer it, but people don't care about the truth. They don't care about the facts. They want to believe him. whatever he says, they take it almost like a religious gospel. They take it as if it's a word coming down that is divine and untouchable. And so they don't care about the facts. They don't want to know that what he's saying is untrue. They're willing to believe in him because it mirrors, I guess, something in them that they're needing, that they're lacking and seeking.
Yeah, they talk about the flying monkeys around the narcissist, and the narcissist gets them to do their dirty work. Do they believe that the narcissist's behavior is appropriate, or do they know it's inappropriate and they continue to just work towards what the narcissist wants?
I think in the case of someone like Donald Trump, and politicians or people that are high up in companies, leadership people, the flying monkeys are an interesting group because some of them don't believe at all what the person's doing. They wouldn't believe a word coming out of Donald Trump's mouth. And there's been all kinds of Republicans, very high level Republicans, that have been quoted and on camera and in writing saying exactly that. But then they flip flop. And the reason they flip flop and still do his bidding and fly around and try to destroy other people is because he's got the power. He's the one that's got power and influence. He can make people believe lies. And if he's got the money and the power and can make people believe anything he says, then they'll do his bidding for their own advantage. They're what I call beneficiaries. So you have the bully, you have the bystander who's terrified usually. So you've got the bully who's lacking and seeking to destroy someone else to feel better. You got the bystander who's terrified or disinterested. And then you've got the beneficiary. And the flying monkeys are the beneficiaries usually of the bullying behavior. They are given opportunities that they don't earn. They're given advantages. Look at the guy that is going to expose him. I think his name is Weisselman or Weisselberg, his financial officer. He's made some kind of a deal, obviously, with the people that are launching the lawsuit in New York against Trump for financial impropriety. He did everything for Trump, not because he believed him, but because he got a free car and he got a fantastic apartment in New York City paid for, and his kids' daycare was paid for, and he benefited from it. And some humans just they
never thinking he was going to be eating prison food one day.
Well,
or will he do prison?
I don't know. There's a lot of people. Trump's flying monkeys do land in prison.
Yeah,
the Cohen, he went to prison. And there's been Roger Stone went to prison. People that are associated with Trump and do his bidding, they do end up in prison. What'll be fascinating to see is if Trump goes to prison. We should talk, Anita. You and I talked about this earlier, and we haven't talked about it yet, and I think it's important, is looking at what's the sociopath.
Yes.
And I'll give you a good example of a sociopath. And they come, they come by it honestly too. Because really, if we want to look at it from a brain point of view, these are all really damaged brains. But a sociopath is someone who their society has conditioned them to behave in certain ways. And you could look at the people around Donald Trump. Their society has conditioned them to believe in a single human being and every word that comes out of their mouth and not question it. They're not critical thinkers. They must be lacking in a certain amount of education, I would think. The people that really do just believe, they're not skeptical. They're not critical thinkers. They're not weighing, facts and reality and truth and lies. They're not doing any of that type of analytical work. They just believe. So, if you grow up in a society that tells you just to believe a certain person or adhere to someone's power model, one of the things that's being studied by Dr. Norman Deutsch, who's a neuroscientist in Canada, is he looks at totalitarian regimes. And he looks at how at an early age, they start to program children. They start to condition them to believe that the West, for example, is the enemy. They build it into stories. They build it into math classes. They build it into everything, that the West is a dangerous, threatening enemy, and they must stand strong against it. Now, if you look at what people in Russia believe, they believe Putin when he says that Zelensky, the leader of Ukraine, is a neo-Nazi. They believe Putin because Putin's in a position of power. He's their leader. They think that what he says is true. They believe in the same way that Americans believe Donald Trump. both men are not telling the truth. Both men are psychopaths, basically. They're pathological liars. They'll bend the truth and they'll destroy other people, and they don't feel anything about it. Putin doesn't care that not only is he killing all these people in Ukraine, he's putting his own young men, his own Russian young men, to the front lines without training. He just doesn't care. There's no empathy there. There's no natural human anguish or guilt or all the kinds of feelings that people who have feelings feel. He sleeps at night, no problem, because he's created this world. So the sociopath, imagine somebody so one of the most glaring examples would be, and this has been studied in very worrisome forms in the research. Stanley Milgram at Yale University, and this was in the 1960s, he wanted to know, how is it possible that German people, normal German people, put their neighbors onto trains and sent them to the gas chambers? How did that happen? How did they put their neighbors' children, their family friends, the kids that went to school with their kids, how did they ever put these people onto trains to their death? It doesn't make sense to human beings. How could it happen? And in the Nuremberg trials, when they were taking, Nazi sympathizers and Nazi personnel and questioning them for war crimes, they kept hearing over and over again, it's not my fault. I had to obey authority. So Stanley Milgram said, what is this? What is this have to obey authority business? And he did one of the most famous experiments. So here he is at Yale University. He set up this experiment whereby he put an actor into a lab coat, white lab coat. They created a booth with a glass wall. They put an electrode machine in there. And then they put Stanley Milgram himself, the professor, the psychologist, played the student. So there was the authority, the teacher figure in the white lab coat, and there was the student. Then they brought random people in and said, hey, we're Yale University. Do you want to do an experiment with us? We need research done and we need your help. We'll pay you some money. Will you do it? All these people are like, sure, no problem. Random, normal people off the street. They're watching the student, played by Professor Stanley Milgram, which they don't know. They're watching another human being sitting in a seat, and they're told to turn up the dial on the electricity if they make mistakes. Every single time they make a mistake, they get a little jolt of electricity. It's just that it can get stronger and stronger and stronger. And it shows on the dial that this is the point of danger. You can do harm to the person. And at this point, you can kill them. Imagine, these are random people off the street. They've got a guy in a white lab coat. They don't know anything about him. They just believe he's a Yale researcher. And the guy in the white lab coat says 4 phrases over and over again to the person. He says, you really need to do this. You really need to turn up the dial. I'm depending on you to turn up the dial. This is important, whatever. The 4 set statements. Anyhow, it is unbelievable. The statistics on it are shocking. You would be shocked to find out just how many people sat in the seat, obeyed authority. Stanley Milgram would be screaming and writhing on the floor as if he's been electrocuted, and they wouldn't stop. They would obey authority, these people. And this experiment has been repeated a number of times with the same results. Over and over again, they find that people obey authority. So then you have to reverse engineer. Why do we obey authority like this? What is going on? Look at our school system. We tell children from the age of 4 and 5 on, all the way up to 18, we tell them to respect and obey and behave and do what the teacher says. We don't tell them to be critical. We don't tell them to ask questions. We don't tell them that some adults aren't worthy of respect. We don't tell them that sometimes it's proper to disobey and rebel and think for themselves and make ethical decisions that are separate from the teacher. I mean, we hand children over to adults in positions of power on a silver platter for abuse because we don't teach them that they've got to think for themselves. They need to come tell a trusted adult that if they feel uncomfortable, they need to act on that. That some teachers are dangerous, some coaches are dangerous, or doctors are dangerous. We just are in this kind of, I don't know, we've got to snap out of it.
Yeah. It's crazy. We did it here with the church. They had access to our children and people who even knew let it happen. It's not that they let it happen, but they are a lot more forgiving than I would be if it was a child of mine. It's really fascinating how their brains work and their lack of empathy and self-awareness and emotional intelligence, and just how they will railroad people. But it's the brains that are most damaged that we need to protect and get the education out there.
Well, I mean, I think what you're doing that's really interesting and important is you're becoming an educational model for all the things that we don't teach. Why are we not teaching our young people about how they could recognize that their own brain is becoming dysfunctional and ways to get it healed, ways to get it repaired and restored to organic brain health? I mean, when a child is bullying another child, that should be an instant medical intervention on the part of the adults. That child doesn't need any discipline. Kids aren't bad. Kids are navigating an incredibly complex world. It's really stressful. They're completely vulnerable to the adults in their worlds. If the adults are being abusive, they don't have any way to save themselves. It's impacting their brain and their body at all times. And if they manifest in mentally ill ways, like needing to find a target and hurt them, we've got to help them. Just like if they came to school with a broken leg, we wouldn't tell them they're bad kids and discipline them and suspend them and expel them. And I mean, granted, when you've got a broken leg, you don't hurt other people. And bullying is very, very serious because it hurts other people. But it's also a red flag that the kid is suffering. There's something very, very wrong. It's very unhealthy, unnatural behavior. So we need to get upstream. What's happening that's making the child feel this way? How can we help? How can we help their family? How can we help the child? Those should be the only questions, because it's not natural, healthy behavior.
Yeah. I think intervention is marvelous at that age. But when you get it, people are leaving universities and schools. They don't know what to expect going into the workplace. They're accepting of how the workplace works, not knowing because they haven't worked there before. And I've seen it time and time again, how behaviors are accepted instead of questioning it. And I know it's hard. And when you do question it, chances are you'll lose your job. But I'd rather be on this side of right than sit there on my hands and say nothing.
Well, I mean, it goes back to what the Stanley Milgram experiment. We don't teach our kids or our adults to be people who speak up, who ask questions, who say, why are we doing it this way? Who can feel safe in the workplace to say, look, I've got a better idea. Let me run it past you. Oh, it won't work? Well, that's okay. I feel confident that you are going to hear me. We're working together. We're collaborating. We take care of each other. I mean, it's like Dr. Sean Aker is a positive psychologist, and all the research shows, he calls it his book. I love his book. It's called The Happiness Advantage. And so he works with a lot of corporate structures and companies and organizations all over the world. And they have him come in and speak and work with their people, because what they find is the happier people are at work, the better productivity, the less sick days, the more creativity, the more dedication when things get tough. I mean, all the research shows that happiness is a massive advantage. And we've been trained in society to believe that once we attain success, we're always trying to get to success, because as long as we do this, as long as we work hard, as long as we endure this bullying, harmful, cruel behavior, as long as we do this, we're going to one day be happy. But that's not how it works. The truth of it is, and this is what I would teach all kids going out of high school or out of college into the workplace, they never forget. The more you pursue your own happiness, and if that means leaving a job because it's a toxic work environment, then do it. Because the more you pursue happiness, the more successful you will be. And that's not my opinion. That's not something I'm just making up. That's backed by extensive research.
But you're like, the happier you are, the more productive you're going to be in your job. The people around you are going to be happy. You're going to look forward to going in. That was my big thing. I used to say to my team, you have to look forward to coming in every day. And because it's the longest part of your day and you need to be happy.
Exactly.
You need to be coming in, feeling happy, coming in and leaving. You won't always love the job, but you not feel that kind of fulfillment in yourself.
Well, I think all of us, or many of us, have had jobs, like even when we were kids, that were very menial, working in a store or something like that, repetition every single day, no real hour or opportunity to be creative. And we still loved it because we had so much fun working with our friends.
Yeah, exactly. And just getting that small, your first jobs, just getting the salary to get out, go out with your friends to buy whatever you want to wear. And it is all about making the most of your day, surrounded by nice people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Jen. And I look forward to the next episode where we'll be continuing on with the Bullied Brain. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me, Anita. Wonderful to see you as always.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Femcast. We invite you now to stay connected with us by hitting the subscribe buttons below and follow us across our social media channels at the Femcast. We value your feedback and reviews. By sharing ideas, insights and experiences, we can all learn, grow and make a meaningful difference. We also want to remind you that we care about your well-being. If any topics discussed on today's episode have raised concerns or you need support, please visit our website www.thefemcast.com for helpful resources and phone numbers. Thank you for being part of the Femcast.